a live now conversation. I am Angel Livas, and I'm going to be leading this amazing conversation that we will be having. We are going to give ourselves a little bit of time. We're going live on a couple different platforms, so we know there's typically a little bit of a delay. So just give us a moment. We're just going to do some background testing to make sure that we are live on YouTube, Facebook. That was our alert that we're live on YouTube, Facebook, as well as LinkedIn. So if you're tuned in, hit us up in the chat. Let us know where you're joining us from. And if you have any specific questions, Kristal, who will be joining us, is an amazing political strategist who often is on CNN, MSNBC, so many platforms, being able to talk about what's happening in this political climate. She's also a fellow Bison, a Howard University grad. So yes, give us a few moments and I will be bringing her in momentarily. And there she is. I told you I'd be bringing her in momentarily.
How are you?
I'm doing well, Kristal. So we just went live, and I was giving people an opportunity to let us know where they're tapping in from in the chat, whether
Okay.
they're on Facebook, LinkedIn, or where else are we live? Or YouTube. So
Okay. Cool.
I told them a little bit about your background, but I think you should tell us a little bit more before we delve into what the state of this nation is in and what's at stake.
Sure. Would you like me to go ahead and get started?
Yeah, go
Okay.
ahead. While I
Okay.
make sure all these other channels are
Sure,
running.
sure. So yeah, as Angel, well, one, thank you, Angel, for offering this opportunity just to come and share some just general thoughts about where we are. Just for folks who don't know me, my name is Kristal Knight. On all of my socials, I go by Kris L Knight, and I work in politics. I've been in politics for the last 10 to 12 years, but most recently, I have been um, serving as a political commentator, either on nonpartisan issues or very partisan issues. But I have a deep background in campaign work at the state, local, and national level. And I feel it a privilege, honestly, to offer commentary because there are not a lot of Black women and Black faces in general that have the level of political analyzation and the background to match it to really talk very extensively about politics. So that's just something that I really have enjoyed. And um, if you know me, you know that I have loved knocking on a door, sitting in a strategy meeting, and also adding my particular take on the political climate in this country. So, with that, I'm excited to have this conversation.
And with that, what is your state of where we are? Because I feel like all the things, right? And I don't feel like we named this happenstance, like, state of the nation and really what's at stake right now. We have, over the last week, uh, Trump, his announcement of his VP, Biden stepping down, Kamala being the most likely candidate for the nomination from the Democratic Party. What are your thoughts on all of these things?
Well, I have lots of thoughts.
I
So,
know.
I I don't like, I'll be honest, I don't like how things have played out on the Democratic side. I think it was sloppy, quite honestly. I think the way that this musical chairs or political chairs happened, um, it was not seamless. But I
Mhm.
do think that we have ended in a good position, and we're actually moving towards a real direction of strength with the vice president being the nominee. Obviously, she has to secure this when we get to Chicago in a couple of weeks for the convention. But I think this back and forth media onslaught of the president was not good for the party. I also think many members of the party, either sitting elected officials or just pundits or whomever, coming out calling for his resignation, I don't think that that helped us. But did it get us to where we are today? Sure, absolutely. There's an argument there. I think, having Kamala be the nominee, it has really thrown the GOP into a flux in that they never truly thought that President Biden would step down. They also never thought that there would be a woman, really in this modern era, who would be a major nominee in a country like the United States of America. And so I think that they are actively trying to scramble, which is why you see the attacks on her as a DEI hire. That was something that Representative Tim Burchett out of Tennessee has stated. I believe Kellyanne Conway has stated that as well. So you see all these people really trying to minimize her qualifications and who she is, but we already know she wouldn't have even been the VP had she not been qualified. And if, voters in 2020 did not go to the polls and vote for President Biden and for her to be our next leaders of this country. And so I think that considering everything that's happened in the last couple of weeks, really, this has been a roller coaster. I mean,
Yeah.
a true roller coaster of a political ride. But I do think that the Democrats are gaining strength now that we have consolidated power, now that we've consolidated our support behind the vice president.
So let me ask you this, because I think that a lot of times we focus on, yes, clearly Kamala is qualified. Clearly, she's been behind the president for the last, or by his side for the last 4 years. But I think a lot of times people are like, for that position, right? To serve in that seat. So are there things that we're not looking at that, maybe we need to kind of like be mindful of as it relates to Kamala and her position and what that could potentially mean and how she leads the country?
Well, yeah, I think you have to consider positioning. I mean, everything in politics. I mean, there are a number of angles anyone could take, but one of the things that is undeniable about Kamala Harris is her position. One, she is the sitting vice president, so that is a position of power in itself. And what
Mhm.
does that mean? That means she is briefed. She is probably the second most brief person in this country behind the president. That means she is astute in foreign affairs, which is something that we absolutely need our president to be strong in. It also means that she has the relationships and the nuance that really calls into question all of the infrastructure, all of the economics, all of the situation room decisions that are being made. She has had a front row seat for the last 3.5 years, and so she brings that experience into the office. And so we cannot discount the learning on the job or on the job training that she has had for the last 3.5 years, and how that will be pivotal if she is successful in clinching the nomination and then going on and becoming the president of the United States. I think the other thing that people really seem to forget is that she was a United States sitting senator. She was a U.S. senator from the state of California. And again, that is real qualification. That is something that she was able to learn on the job on, obviously. That's also experience that she's bringing in, running a committee, understanding Congress, being a tiebreaker in the vice presidential seat, considering that the Senate was 50-50. But even if we go back beyond her U.S. Senate seat, we have to go back to her time as the Attorney General in the state of California. We also can go back to her time as the Attorney General in the city of San Francisco. So if we think about her experience as a lawyer, as a prosecutor, she is bringing all of those roles into why she is qualified to be the next president of the United States. And so for the people out there who may say, well, she's just been the vice president, she's been in the shadows, we haven't seen her. She has been listening, learning, offering sound strategy, offering sound advice. And that is something that the president has taken into many decisions that he's made on behalf of this country. And we should all feel that she is not just qualified, but well prepared to lead us in November.
So one of the things that I always look at and evaluate, because I politics is not my ministry. I used
That's
to work
fine.
at Bloomberg, like one of my first jobs out of graduating from Howard, and it was just not for me, right? So watching Trump and all of his antics and all the things that he brings to the table, right? He always seems to be 5 steps ahead of what anybody else is necessarily thinking about, considering. And
Mhm.
so all of the things that led up to the shoot or what happened in Philadelphia, him announcing his VP, which I thought was very strategic, and made a lot of sense with who he selected as his VP. What do you think we can expect to see in the coming days, coming weeks as we lead up to the DNC?
Well, I think there are a couple things there that you said. I think one, the attempted assassination in Butler, Pennsylvania, it was unfortunate, and obviously subsequently, former President Trump announced that J.D. Vance, the freshman senator from Ohio, is now his running mate, and I'm sure plenty of people know that J.D. Vance wrote Hillbilly Elegy. I actually read the book when it was first published. And so there's this
What do you think of the book?
Appalachia um, component that I think Trump has strategically decided that he wants to really zero and focus in on through JD Vance, because
Mhm.
of his roots in Kentucky, because of the tie between Kentucky and Ohio, because of the opioid epidemic, which we know has definitely negatively affected a lot of white, middle, or lower class residents in this country. So there's a story there that I think Donald Trump was really trying to tie in through his selection of JD Vance. I think what's interesting now is that Kamala has options before her. She obviously has an option in Governor Andy Beshear, who is the governor of Kentucky, Josh Shapiro, who's the governor of Pennsylvania, and maybe even the current governor of North Carolina. Those are all real options, and you pick a vice presidential candidate based on a number of mathematical calculations. Like, we're all trying to get to 270, so whoever gets to 270 electoral votes, he or
That's what I'm
she, in
looking at.
this case, she being Kamala, would become president. But you
Mhm.
also think about, what are the gaps and the traps that I'm missing in my own candidacy that my vice president can help bring other Americans into play. And so when I think about Kamala Harris being from the West Coast, from California, having a Southern governor where we know North Carolina, Georgia, these are two big important states to the electoral map. So picking the governor of North Carolina makes sense, right? Because North Carolina is a swing state. But also, there's an argument about really elevating a new face and a new wave of the South through Andy Beshear, who's the governor of Kentucky. But then when you also think about Josh Shapiro in Pennsylvania, when you think about Pennsylvania, you have to think about Ohio, you have to think about Wisconsin, you have to think about Michigan, you have to
Mhm.
think about all those states, again, that are critical to the electoral map, but also have proven to be pivotal states in election seasons, year after year and season after season. And so I think that as she heads into the DNC convention, she has to make a selection that she believes will unite Americans around her candidacy, but also bring in the millions of people who are still undecided. And so that is the thing, the key point, I think, data point that will be important for this election cycle, because people who are hardcore Dem or hardcore Republican, they're pretty much settled in either of these two tickets. But there's still a large swath of their public that has not decided on who they want to vote for. And so, whomever she chooses, this will be something hopefully that she'll be able to speak to and that the campaign will be able to speak to as they're out selling the message around the Harris ticket.
It's very interesting. It's very interesting. I mean, even if you're not really into politics, like just watching everything and just how people have rallied to get involved, the 1.6 million that the Black women had raised on
Hmm.
Wednesday. And that, well, what's today? No, today on Monday. What's today?
Yeah, it was Monday.
Yeah. So the women did
Actually, it
Monday.
was Sunday night, if I'm not
Yeah,
mistaken.
Sunday
It was
night.
Sunday night. Yeah. Yesterday was the Black
And then
men.
yesterday the men got
Hmm.
on. And how much did the men end up raising?
I think they did about 1.2. I think the numbers were like right there neck and neck. It might have been a couple, 100,000 more, but they
Mhm.
were, I think it might have been 1.3, 1.2, something, somewhere around there.
So one of the things that I was thinking about, because I was kind of ear hustling on the men's conversation last night, and I was also on the call for the women's, but it made me wonder how much of this election this year is going to come down to race. And I know when Obama was running, everybody was like, I just want to vote for the Black man.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then some people were like, I'm never doing that again. Like, I need to pay attention, right?
Right.
And then this time, and again, listening to the things that were being said on the calls the last couple days, um, it was kind of gave me that same energy of we got to stand by our sister. And I'm a lady of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated as well. So that is my soror. So
Hmm.
of course there's this unity from the divine nine, from Black women across the world, and Black men want to support the Black woman, right?
Right.
um but then I also think on the flip side, the people who are not Black are also like, okay, well, this can't just be about race. This is about really how the country is going to be moved and all of those different things. So what are your thoughts on like how pivotal this will be for the Black community, or this election
Man,
is?
yeah, I'm sitting with that question, one, because I'm a Howard University graduate, just like you, and just like our
Come
Madam
on.
VP.
Yes.
Um, but I'm also sitting with the fact that in 2016 we had another pivotal moment to elect a woman, and we did not. Now Kamala is different because she is a woman of color. She is a Black woman, Black
Mhm.
identifying woman, and I think just as Barack Obama's presidency was pivotal and consequential for the Black community in this country, I feel the same way. I think it even deeper because she is a woman, and the door that she will shatter and the glass that she will finally break. That is something that literally, like, it gives me chills to be like, oh my God, the first woman, because I just imagine how many people will come after her, how many women will come after her. I think on a deeper contextual level, um, as Black people and as Black people who are HBCU graduates, this sends a clear message not only to invest in HBCU education, but it also says something that she did not come from Harvard or Yale or Columbia or one of these white elite colleges. This
Mhm.
is, it feels very homegrown. And that is the thing that really makes me just feel like this moment is so much more historic, more so than Barack Obama.
Mhm.
I also think, considering all of the attacks on Roe versus Wade and women's bodies, having a woman in office, a woman with a uterus, a woman with breasts, all of these things that we take for granted, but these are things that will go into her ethos, hopefully, as she is making decisions that are consequential to women across this country. But for the Black community, I think we're looking for some tangibles, to be quite honest. HB 50 has not made it out of the actual House committee, which is the bill on reparations. Will Kamala be the person to move this bill forward? I think about the John Lewis Policing and Justice Act, or maybe that's the George Floyd Police and Justice Act. These are bills that are consequential to Black lives. And so again, will Kamala Harris be the person to move these type of bills forward? We think about child tax credits. And while that was something that obviously has happened under this presidency, for people who have children. But what does that mean, particularly for the Black community? How will that help drive a deeper economic base in our community? And so those are just a few policy tangibles that I think Black people will absolutely, and we should, be looking for in a Black president. And so those are the reasons why I think it's so important that we do get her into office, because she is showing and expanding not only the database for what women can do in this country, but also for what Black people can do in this country, and Black people who are graduates of illustrious universities like Howard University. Yes, chin up, chin up.
It's so funny. So I recently saw a meme that was like it had Kamala, Madam soon to be president, peeking around the corner saying, is this what a Black job look like? And it just made me laugh because it's like, so many times there is this stigma of what Black people are qualified for,
Hmm.
especially a Black woman. And
Hmm.
so to be able to witness in our lifetime the potential, the idea that is an actual viable, it's not like, Madam Chisholm where it was, she was made it to the ballot or, was on the ticket, but this is like a real possibility.
Hmm.
Um, and it's funny because I've heard two different stances where some people are like, well, it is there a more qualified individual that the Democratic Party should be looking at? And I feel like you kind of answered this earlier, but
Hmm.
like, what are your thoughts on, should it just be an automatic kind of pass down nomination to the VP, or should the Democratic Party be evaluating other potential candidates to present?
Well, that's the $1 million question, because so many people, I feel, were intentionally and silently trying to skip over Kamala Harris. And we should just name that, right? Like that's a real sexist and misogynistic thing that I think it does exist within the party. This is not just someone from the other side trying to come in and say she shouldn't be the president. There were clear whispers of other candidates, other elected officials who really probably thought about throwing their hat into the ring. Is it
Mm-hmm.
the right thing to do? No, she is. So when I think about, is she qualified? Y'all, this woman would not be the vice president if she was not qualified. Um, I think every nomination should be earned. That said, every nomination should be earned. She will still have to go to the convention and be officially nominated. Joe Biden endorsing her is just that. It's an endorsement. She
Mm-hmm.
still has to work the phones, call the delegates, and share her message and her vision on why she deserves to be president. And when those delegates go into the convention center, they will have a choice to make on what they will do. Now, what we already know is that she has locked up the delegates to clinch the nomination. So that already tells us that there are a large swath of the delegates who believe that she is qualified enough or in the position to be the president.
Mm-hmm.
So when I think about, are there other people who are more qualified? I don't know. And quite frankly, that's not the question before us. The question before us is, will Kamala Harris clinch the nomination on the convention floor in Chicago at the DNC convention? That is the most important thing that we should be asking ourselves now, not about who and who else. I think there is a time to have that conversation about building the bench, to make sure that as we continue down this political trajectory, we are preparing future leaders in the Democratic Party to be ready to step up in a time like this. And I'm just thankful that Kamala was, wise enough to decide that she wanted to run for Senate so that she could be in the position, right? Because all of this is around positioning. She was positioned to run for president in 2020, decided to drop out, was selected to become the vice presidential running mate of Joe Biden, and is now on the cusp of something truly historic. And so when I think about who's qualified, are those people in a position to even be called upon? Are those people in a position to actually run? Those are the things that we have to think about. But right now, this moment is reserved for Kamala and Kamala only.
So let me ask you this then, because I feel like we need to educate the people. Um, because I'm just going, I'm gonna keep it funky. Most Black people are not paying attention to elections unless it's something like this.
Mm-hmm.
That's just the reality, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so understanding what's at stake and what happens next is essential so that there's a level of understanding of like, okay, like you just said, yeah, Biden saying, hey, I support Kamala doesn't mean that she's an automatic nominee. And I've had several conversations with people where they're like, no, she's already the no, but she's not, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
can you break down what needs to happen? I know it's I know it's the delegates, but can you break down like what needs to happen in order for an official nomination of Vice President Kamala Harris to be the official Democratic nominee?
Yeah. So let me back up a little bit. So I think for people who are watching this, they may say, well, Kristal, I went and cast my vote in the primary to select Joe Biden, and now he is not in the running to be the nominee. One, you're correct. If you went and cast a ballot on the Democratic ticket, you have already selected the ticket, which was Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Because Joe Biden has relinquished his nomination and stepped down, that process basically invalidated those votes, essentially, if you will. That's just for lack of better terms. But even if Joe Biden was still going to the convention, there are super delegates in every single state. They could include your neighbors. So that could be people like you or I, Angel, people who just live in their day to day lives. It could be an elected official. It could be somebody that sits on a state party in a volunteer or official capacity. It can be a former elected official. So it could be a former governor or a former state senator or a former representative or a former county elected official. So every single state has delegates, and delegates are selected to represent the different candidates that will be on the ballot. So there are delegates in every state for Donald Trump, and then there are delegates in every state. Now, on the Democratic side, they really don't have a home per se right now because we don't have an actual nominee yet, but there are
Mhm.
delegates who've already pledged their support towards Kamala Harris. So all of these people from all across the country will convene in Chicago, and there will be a roll call. There will be a roll call by state where if there are, 15, 25, 85 delegates per state, and it's different in every state. I want to be clear about that. Not every state has the same number of delegates, but those delegates will stand up and decide where they're going to cast their ballot. And so if they decide that they don't want to vote for her, then that is a vote that she does not get from that particular state. That doesn't mean that she still cannot clinch the nomination for that state based on the mathematical equation of how many delegates are needed per state. So when you think about how you're voting in hopes that the delegates that represent your party, that represent the state, will ultimately in the general election, but right now for the party election, they are going to represent the will of the people. And so, if the will of the people overwhelmingly voted for Joe Biden, he has stepped down, he has said that he is throwing his full support behind Kamala Harris, then we can only hope that the delegates in those respective states will throw their votes at the convention behind her. Once they do that, she then is the official nominee, and she is running against Donald Trump. Now that he has clinched his party's nomination, and now that JD Vance has clinched the vice presidential nomination. So at the convention, Kamala and whomever she chooses to be her VP candidate, they will officially become the Democratic Party ticket.
Now, that's not to say that another party can't create a nominee to be added to the ticket. Is that accurate?
Yeah, so it's not to say, so there are two things. You have
They're
the
the only ones that'll end up on the ticket.
right. You have RFK Jr., who is running as a third party, so he won't be at either convention. So he wasn't at the RNC, he's not at the DNC because he's not a part of our two-party system. But there is a possibility that someone at the DNC convention could say, hey, I am Representative so and so, or I am whomever, and I want to seek the party's nomination. That would be wild. That would be crazy. Let's hope that that does not happen, but that
Possible.
is a real possibility.
Mhm.
And so, because she has been working the phones, working this process, we should assume that she has clinched the party's nomination and that she should not receive any challenge on the floor at the convention.
Mhm. And so let's just say all goes smoothly, which
Hmm.
nothing in this election has thus far.
Right.
Um, let's just say all goes smoothly.
Hmm. Hmm.
What will be needed for her to clinch a win over former President Donald Trump?
Well, I mean, it's simple. We need people to vote. I mean, that's what she will need. She will need um, enough people in about 15 to 17 states in this country to turn out to vote for her so that the delegates in that state, the electoral college, excuse me, in that state will vote in favor of her. So when I said at the top of the call, the mathematical equation is 270. 270 electoral votes means that you become president of the United States. So when
Mhm.
you think about the map, the electoral map, this is really a game of margins. Literally every single vote counts.
Mhm.
Literally, if she is short enough voters in a particularly key state, that could mean trouble for her 270 prospect of winning in November. And so moving out of the convention, it really becomes a game of turnout and a game of numbers. How many people can you turn out in states like Michigan, Wisconsin, Nevada, Arizona, North Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Colorado, Ohio?
Mhm.
These are really, really big states that tend to be swing. Now, we know that there are solidly Democratic states, there are solidly Republican states. It just so happens that a lot of the Democratic states tend to have higher electoral college votes. So when you think about a state like California, a lot of votes coming out of there. We know that that will likely be a blue state. But when you think about states like Texas, again, a lot of votes coming out of there. We also know that that will likely be a red state, a Republican state. So you begin to really do the math and decide, where can I, pump more money into a state to make sure that this particular key state will give me the 15 electoral votes that I need, or the 19 electoral votes that I need, that will help me get to the 270 votes to become president. And so when you ask, what do people have to do? She literally has to run up the score. She got to run up the score in Wisconsin. She
By
has to
who? like who is like who are going to be the deciding factor? Because I remember in Obama it was the young people. It was like, yo, I need the young
Hmm.
people get out and vote. That was the target market.
Right.
What is that deciding market today?
Yeah, today that is still, young people will still be a big factor in this race. So um, they are still being persuaded and messaged to. I also think that um, older voters, older voters continue to be a large swath of the consistent voting population. But I think as it relates to Kamala, Black women have been the bedrock of the Democratic Party, but she needs Black women to really turn up and show out. I also think she has to have higher numbers of Black men voters than turned up in 2020 for Joe Biden. What we know right now about this party dynamic is there was like a small swath of Black men who saw themselves identifying in the candidacy of Donald Trump. And so, what she has to do now is win those Black men back. Because, again, even if Donald Trump doesn't um, garner a lot of Black men votes, he only has to get enough to make it negatively affect her. And
Mhm.
so, that is something that we absolutely have to message on and focus on. I think the other thing that I was having this conversation earlier today with someone, just thinking about the suburban vote, and I think about the betrayal of white suburban women in 2016 with the Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump election. So I don't know what can be done around white suburban women, but what I do know is you can run up the numbers with your base, and if your base on the Democratic Party is Black women, youth vote, and seniors, then that is where you have to spend money to make sure that you blow that out of the water. You have
Mhm.
to blow it out of the water, getting money in those respective states, on college campuses, all across the country, to make sure that people turn out in really high numbers.
So one of the areas that I know that I often hear, like you said, that small percentage of the Black men, but I think also Black women, who are business owners,
Hmm.
and the benefits that they saw revenue wise, when Trump was in office, were astronomical, and that's like a huge factor with them.
Hmm.
And so I'm even thinking about like, well, what will Kamala be able to do to win over the business owners? I know she recently had the Bow Group at the White House yesterday, which was a group of women Black women who have like, I believe, like 1.4 billion dollars that they have in revenue for their companies, and they were thinking of strategies and all of those different things, and I think that's great. But to your point, I think the Black woman for the most part has Kamala's back, I think, from a lot of what I'm hearing. But
Hmm.
for business owners, especially Black men business owners, what will that look like? Or is there a strategy in place? Because they're like, they lost a lot of money under the Biden administration, and if Kamala was his right hand, then really what's going to change? I'd rather, since I have the opportunity to potentially put Trump back in place, why wouldn't I do that?
Yeah, that's such a great question, because really this is about economics, and this is about tax cuts. If we want to just be honest and name the thing, um, we know that under the Trump presidency, business owners, small and large, enjoyed lofty tax cuts. And if you are an economic voter, you think about voting with your pocketbook or with your wallet, then you don't really care who's in office. You care about your bottom line for your business. And so if I were on Kamala's team, if I were advising her on what to do, I would talk about the small business creation that has been expanded, Black small business creation that has been expanded under the Biden Harris administration. So when you think about states like Michigan, how many more Black business owners have been created from the beginning of the administration until now? And I would run on that. I would run the numbers in all of these major states and talk about how Black wealth has grown, not only from the small business perspective, but maybe through infrastructure. So when they pass this historic infrastructure bill, that pump money into these respective economies. So roads and bridges, what does that mean, right? Well, I don't know, infrastructure. What does that really mean, Kristal? Well, it means if you are a small business owner who lays cement for a living and they are building a new road, hopefully in your respective county or in your respective jurisdiction, you've been able to get some of that federal money and get work to grow your business. And so that is something that helps with small business owners. When you think about, again, roads and bridges, when we look at what happened with the Key Bridge in Baltimore, someone will have to work on that. And how many minority owned firms will be privy to those contracts? That's something that the federal government, President Biden has already said that there is the intent to fund that and provide that money to the governor. It will then be on the governor to disseminate that through his transportation budget. And those folks that are in charge will have to decide who will be the prime contractors on those type of projects and who will be the subs. And so those subs and primes could be Black business owners. And so those are things when you think about expanding Black business growth, that I would, if I were on her team, I would be speaking to those things. And so when you're asking the question around people who feel like they made more money, that's because of the kind of tax cuts that Trump provided. And when Biden got into office, he really cared about expanding the middle class and not helping the rich get richer. And so what do I say to people who feel like they made more money under a Trump presidency? I would say, how did the money that you made during those 4 years help expand the middle class Black base in your respective county, state, or jurisdiction?
No, that's fair. That's great.
And let me add one more thing. How many Black people were you able to employ because of the more money that you made?
Yeah, no, that's real. So my last question
Sure.
might be a little ignorant, but I'm gonna ask it anyways.
Oh,
Um,
Lord.
Crystal said, "Oh Lord."
Okay.
Okay, so being that the assassination attempt on former President Trump was through gun violence, do we foresee him coming to a debate with a different mindset around um, the right to carry and the right to bear arms?
Absolutely not. I don't believe it because I know that um, the right to bear arms is something that Donald Trump and many people um, in his base have enjoyed. I also believe that Donald Trump has enjoyed a warm relationship with the National Rifle Association, also known under the NRA. And if we're being honest, there are plenty of people in this country who identify across a number of political parties who believe in carrying a gun and want the right to take up arms wherever they choose. I don't believe that Donald Trump is truly prepared to debate Kamala Harris really on any subject, if I'm being honest, because of his age. He's now the oldest president to run for office now that Joe Biden has officially dropped out, but also because Donald Trump is a liar, right? Like this is a man who has lied about his finances. This is a man who has lied about his sexual assault cases. This is a man who has lied about classified documents. And so if we're expecting anything different, I how could we get something different with the same horse in the race, right? So we're expecting something new with the same person. And we absolutely know what we will get in another debate with Donald Trump: more lies, more alternative facts, but nothing substantive to put care and concern around gun control, which has affected every single person in this country in some way or another, and has literally come to his front doorstep or his front ear step, right? Like, and again, I think it's been uncovered. I want to be careful to say, um, the Secret Service has still not come out and said that he was not hit with a bullet, but I think what has been reported is that his ear was grazed through glass.
Mm-hmm.
That said, the glass was penetrated through a bullet. And if we are expecting Donald Trump to come out and say that there will be an outlaw on bans, and that he plans to reform gun control, I don't see it. Even with it coming right up to his doorstep, I don't see it.
I started part of this conversation around the fact that this election is going to be heavily around race. And I think that, you know, just thinking about, like you said, the lies that have been told, the lies that have been detested, and the truth that has been revealed or uncovered. Um, and yet, this individual who I think it's safe to say, and anybody who's watching, if you disagree with this statement, you can argue with me about it later. But if it was a black man that had, what is it, 38?
34 felony accounts.
If it was a black man with
Mm-hmm.
one felony account,
One.
this wouldn't even be a conversation on a table. And
Absolutely.
so when we think about really what we're looking at what I feel like Black women have always had to be better, work harder, be stronger, be more intentional. Black women, we are raised to be all of these different things just so we have the opportunity to have a seat at the table.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you look at someone else who is just afforded the opportunity because of the color of his skin,
Mm-hmm.
because of the relationships that his money has fostered,
Mm-hmm.
um, it just it's a, I don't know.
Yeah, I
It's
mean,
like
it's
a blanket, like black white situation.
absolutely. We know that there is a double standard in this country, and there are two Americas. There is an America for white people in the justice system, and then there's an America for Black people in the justice system. And Donald Trump is getting preferential treatment,
Well, don't you think he's
undeniable.
going to use that to try to connect with the black man?
He already has. He already
But
said
I mean,
that.
even more so.
I
Now
mean,
he's been shot
I don't.
and
I
got
mean,
felony.
I feel like he's already tried to use, like, I know what it feels like to have people beat you up. I know what it feels like to go through a justice system that is unjust. I know what it feels like to be knocked down, but I get back up, be shot at, but I survived. Like, Donald Trump is trying everything he can to have street cred, but
Mhm.
I just, I love the way that Kamala's team has already positioned her. This is a race between a prosecutor and a predator. Someone who is had a career of putting criminals and predators behind bars. And that is what Donald Trump is. He's a criminal, he's a grifter, he's a predator, he is
Not a
a
good.
liar, he is a twice impeached, 34 felony convicted. Like, we could go on the negatives on him. But the fact that the Republican Party still decided to nominate him is wild and shameful.
Yeah. Well, we may have you back as things continue to unfold. Will you be at the DNC?
Yes, I will be there.
Okay. Well,
Hopefully,
um,
we'll see you then.
yes, we're figuring that part out. Share with us your contact information in case
Sure.
people would like to follow you and stay up to date and abreast of all of the amazing commentary that you have.
Yeah, so you can find me on all my social media channels at Kris, KrisL, as in the letter L, Knight, Knight, at Kris L Knight. I live on TikTok. That is my jam. I do post on Instagram and Twitter a lot, but if you want to know like how I feel pretty much day to day or every couple days, I am always on TikTok. And so I'm encouraging people to go to my TikTok channel, follow me, also leave me a comment on one of the videos. I love, providing commentary. I also put all of my clips up there. I also have a website, which is www.krislknight.com. It has an archive of a few of my clips. I don't keep all of them up there because it's just so many, but I also just have general information if folks would like to be in contact with me. You're able to go to the contact page there. But I'd love to stay engaged. So I really appreciate you, thinking about me and giving me the time.
Of course, of course. This was fabulous. Y'all heard that. I got so many clips. I'm just, I'm everywhere.
Respectfully, respectfully.
But we do hope to have Kristal on the Live Podcast Network again. Hopefully, we'll be able to get her podcast. We'll have
Yes.
that conversation again soon.
Mhm.
But for everybody at home, thank you so much for taking the time to spend this time with us to learn more about the state of the nation and really what's at stake. To learn more about the Alive Podcast Network, you can visit us online at alivepodcastnetwork.com and download the apps in both app stores, iOS or Android. We have the largest repository of Black hosted shows, and you can download us at Alive Podcast Network. All right. This has been great. Thank you, Kris. Thank you, you at home. And we look forward to seeing you guys again soon. Be blessed.
Thank you.